Everyone for coming to this talk. I'm Anita Sarma. I'm a professor at Oregon State University. And one of my passions is um, looking at open source community because when I started, it was such a anomaly, right? Here are people just spending all their free time working on code, working on a community, all for just volunteering. And you create such immense complex code. You have sent stuff to Mars, right? It's pretty amazing. But one of the things that, and then is like, open source is such an amazing place, not only for people to come in like-minded, but also it helps for tech career growth, right? More and more recruiters are now looking at GitHub profiles. It really impacts career growth, understanding technology, learning technology on your own from experts when you might not have an expert in hand. So it's really a great enabler. But if you look at the diversity part, right? Open source has a diversity problem, right? There's very few women, very few people of different races and region, right? It's very Western civilization, Europe and America focused. So that makes a difference on how healthy your ecosystem is. And that has been one of my research threads is understanding open source sustainability through an inclusivity lens. Now, to talk about here, inclusivity can be for different types of concerns, different types of demographics. My work has largely focused on gender inclusivity. So that's where most of my insights will be coming from. All right, let's see how to. Okay. So when you think of open source sustainability, you can think about the product, licensing, maintenance, dependability mess, right? How will things stay secure? But there's also the other part of sustainability, which is the community and the people. And that's where I focus on. To create a sustainable OSS ecosystem, you need to do kind of three things. One, be able to bring new people in, bring the contributors, because that's what drives your work, as well as retain them, right? And to do that, you need to first remove barriers to entry so people can actually join the project and then scaffold the pathway to success. And while you're doing this, it's really important to have an inclusive environment or a welcoming environment. Because if you do that, that will actually automatically foster diversity. There is no way to just bring some underrepresented group by force and bring them to the community. If it is not a welcoming environment, they will just be unhappy and they will leave, right? But if you have an inclusive community, people would come and people will like grow and it'll just be a more positive feedback loop. And having a diverse contributor set is not just for DEI and social justice. It actually impacts your bottom line. Many research in software engineering, in human-computer interaction, as well as management, has shown that diversity of people brings you diversity of thoughts, which makes for innovative products and much more project resilience. So it's all for the greater good as well as to the bottom line. In this talk, I'm going to kind of touch on 4 parts. The first 3 parts are kind of very high-level views of research I have done. I'm not going to focus on the methods, but more at the narrative of the storyline. And for each of these pieces of work, I have QR code that goes to the academic paper that you can look at. And the last part is kind of more discussion-oriented. We are just starting with it, so we'll see where it goes. So thinking about, let me go one step back. So the first 2 parts is going to be how to be inclusive. And the third part is like scaffolding contributor to success, right? If you think about inclusive technology design, right? And remember, I work on gender inclusivity. So you might be wondering, how can software be biased? Like, how can software be exclusionary? It's just a software. It's agnostic of anything, right? What are you talking about? And the answer is that the very tools, technology, processes, as well as documentation that we create, that we use, that we expect others to use, actually have embedded biases. Why? It's because humans are messy. We don't all think alike. There are like individual differences, right? In how we think, what we have experienced, how we react, how we interact with technology, and how we problem solve with technology, right? So when I talk about problem solving with technology, it is you're sitting in front of a computer, something happens, and you have to think. You submitted a pull request and you get a conflict notification like, You're problem solving. Oh no, where is the problem? Where should I do the diff? Which branch am I working on, right? So you're thinking of how to solve this particular problem, which is a conflict warning, for example. And then individuals think differently. And that impacts their interaction with technology. We have been working on this project called GenderMag method for like about last 10, actually 15 years now almost. And we first started with gender XCI research, looking at how different individuals interact with technology. From there, we kind of distilled these 5 problem solving styles, I'll call them as facets later on, that have shown differences in how individuals problem solve, at least from 5 different independent empirical studies. What do I mean by problem solve, right? Motivations. Someone might be wanting to solve a task. Somebody might be wanting to use ChatGPT because they have a task to solve, right? It's accomplishing task. Whereas other people like, ooh, perplexity, ooh, DeepSeek, let me go find something, let me go play with it. Those are the technophiles. Some people do comprehensive information processing. They look at all the parts of the task, all the information needed for a task before starting it. And on the other end of the spectrum is selective, where you take the first actionable unit of work and you start working, right? And neither of these styles are bad or good. It's just what they prefer. And sometimes, selective information processing is great because you get work done fast. I'm a selective processor. But sometimes it kind of hurts. Like I just had a recent, I was program chairing a conference, and there was this huge number of steps I had to set up for the conference management system. After almost 45, 50 minutes of doing all the steps, I come across this instruction that says, oh, by the way, as a conference chair, if you do not want to set up this management system, we can set it up for you. We actually prefer you do let us do it. But if you want to have control, you could do it. And there are 5 more steps that you need to do. And I'm like, no, I could have just offloaded this whole work, right? And now I have to do even 5 more steps because I cannot just remove that instance. It was a paid instance. It could not be just deregistered. So I had to do way more work because of this. But what happens, and we have like persona, say Abby is looking out for all these problem solving styles and STEM. But what happens if the Tims of the world are creating this software for the Tims user, right? All the Abbeys and all those individuals who are on this end of the spectrum get left behind. They just have to do that one more step. I have to spend half an hour more work in getting this task done. And these are like paper cuts. It keeps adding up and then gets annoying, and sometimes it causes people to quit. And why does this become a gender inclusivity problem? Because time and again, what we have found is that the distribution of preferred problem-solving style of women tend to skew towards the Abby style, and for the men tend to skew over the Tim styles, right? And these 5 facets, when we picked it out, they showed statistical clustering by gender. And that's why we picked these 5 facets, because this becomes a gender inclusivity problem. So what shall we do? It's not we build a pink version or a blue version, right? Or we just drop all the people. We need to debug your software so that everybody is taken care of. Because again, humans are messy. It's not that all women are this kind or all men are this kind, or everybody is going to be an Abby or not. People are all over the map, right? Because it's situational. So the idea is, how can we debug your software so that both ends of the spectrum of problem-solving style is taken care of, and then everyone is taken care of? And that's the idea of GenderMag. So what can you do about it? We have come up with a evaluation method. It's an approach. It's called a discounted approach. So one of the ways to do that is using a specialized cognitive walkthrough, which basically takes a use case or a user journey, and you go screen by screen, the ideal user journey or use case, and then you ask what the user is trying to do, and then you put on the hat of Abby or Tim and see if Abby would be able to take this step, make certain that she's making progress towards that step, given the problem-solving styles. If there are problem-solving styles that are impacted, we call them inclusivity bugs. If it's just a problem without the problem-solving style, it's a usability bug. And many instances where open source software teams, the top one, as well as commercial companies have evaluated their tools using GenderMag method and then done a user study later and seen it's actually done better, right? So this is an open source project. This was on their content. README is contributing MD. In the original part, those with Abby facets had this many failures. With Tim facets, this few. They fixed it and look at it. Everyone does better, right? And then the difference between the orange and the blue, the Abby's and the Tims reduces. And same over here, this one was actually, done through gender. So this was women and men based on their preferred problem-solving style. And post, why is it going away? I don't know. Yes, and post, it does better, right? So two things to take out from here. One is if you resolve these problem-solving or inclusivity bugs, it actually helps those who have those problem-solving styles. That's the top part. But it not only makes it better, but it kind of reduces the gap. So it's also equitable, right? It's reducing the gaps here. So it makes it also equitable software. QR code for the actual papers, a lot more details in there. But this is kind of my last slide on how to create inclusive technology. We are now kind of moving into how to do some kind of automation about it because cognitive walkthroughs are really intense, time consuming. So we are going to see the power of LLMs and see how we can get some of the automation done. We are also looking at facets or problem-solving styles that differ because of their SES status, because where you grew up, your communication, literacy, authority, how do you control towards authority, those kind of things also impact how people use software. So over that. So now that you know you can build inclusive technology, what about inclusive community design, right? Because that's also important. We did a survey in a company with like 11,000 people across a whole bunch of countries, whole bunch of roles. And we were interested in understanding what gives a sense of belonging to the team, right? Because that will be inclusive. These were through like 4 questions, very complex statistical voodoo going on here to kind of find out, instead of asking, do you feel a sense of belonging, A, B questions, asking more questions about decision making and other aspects that create this latent construct that is the feeling of belonging. Similarly, more basic questions that goes towards understanding what work appreciation is and psychological safety. And of course, work appreciation and psychology safety really contribute, this is 0.4, 0.39, towards feeling of belonging. And there are control factors of gender, authority in your power distance, which is your team membership, as well as tenure. But let's focus on work appreciation. You all have felt, right? If you're doing something and nobody appreciates it, you don't feel a sense of belonging. So here's a question. What, according to you, would be the situation? Would software projects survive if everyone was a feature developer? Yeah? You'd have amazing software project? Nah? You're missing what? You're missing things like mentoring, writing, quote unquote, non-sexy stuff like maintenance code, editing, writing documentation, community management, a lot of this, right? And these are really important parts of the project that we call actually glue work, which are basically the critical work that keeps the project going and binds the community together, but are often underappreciated. It's actually hidden. You can't even see it. How many of you have felt this or seen it happen, right? These are actual quotes that we have collected from interviews. Someone spent hours maintaining old code, but didn't get any credit in the release notes. Onboarded 5 new contributors, but see no impact in any of the recognition, mailing lists or anything. Or rewrote the entire documentation, 10 times more usable, but no official acknowledgement, right? So these are very important things, but unfortunately, a lot of time, only code comments, only feature improvements or new features are the ones that get recognized, that get celebrated, right? And the consequences of that is, if I'm not feeling I feel unappreciated, I did all that work on documentation. People are doing it better, but nobody cares. I would stay, I'll quit, right? I'll go somewhere else where my work is appreciated. And this can create a negative feedback loop, weakening a project sustainability because more people would go, documentation will suffer, less people would be able to use it, right? So not only it makes it harder for you to retain diverse contributors, because we have also seen quite often those who are from the underrepresented groups like doing mentoring, like doing documentation, like helping those who are feeling challenged, right? So not only it creates not a great project anymore because of its artifacts, but also because people are leaving, and more often than not, it would be those from underrepresented groups who would be leaving. But it's a difficult question, right? Because I spend hours talking to someone on Zoom, like, how will you track it, right? So it's not an easy question to answer. Where do these contributions actually live? How can they be tracked? And how they should be rewarded, right? It's important to documentation, but it's also really important to do this product feature that now has 10,000 more users, right? How do you decide what is important? How do you give any kind of weight? And if you should actually give weights, right? So we did another study. We did literature review, we did focus group discussions, interviews, survey, a whole lot of work. Because what we were trying to do is let's create a taxonomy of what glue work is. Because in academic literature, people talk about certain non-code contributions. There are a lot of blogs that talk about different things. So we said, let's take a step back. Let's create this taxonomy, because that taxonomy is important to next tack of finding out where these contributions live and how would you be tracking them. So we did like into these four groups: code and technical management, documentation, mentoring and support, and project and community leadership. Then we also asked people, where do these contributions live? And what are some ways that you can actually acknowledge them? Right? What's your community doing? What do you think we should do? We had questions like that and a large scale survey. You can learn more in that QR code. But let's take one example, like mentoring, because mentoring is so crucial. We all know mentoring is important. Mentoring can happen in event platforms or community website. So maybe you can acknowledge them in project documentation. Let me take one more instance of just a pull request, right? Code reviews happen a lot. And you can actually do mentoring through the code reviews by teaching people how to do a better job, why someone should do a certain way of writing the code, right? And these can be maybe acknowledged in the pull request issue comments. And one of our interviews has said, like, they spent hours on Zoom, multiple sessions, trying to figure this complex code out. But when it was submitted, it was just that author. This particular person, who was a woman, was completely, the person who submitted was eternally grateful, but there was no actual trace. What if we have something as simple as @mentor, right? Just like we have @author, if you have something like @mentor that your project uses, there is such an easy way of tracking who helped whom. Second is scaffolding contributor success, third part. I will probably not be able to finish it because I don't know how strict we are on time. Maybe I'll take 5 more minutes and I will just talk one or two things here, and then I'll move to the final part, which is the AI part, right? But scaffolding contributor successes are important, and this can happen just through your code reviews. And we call it implicit mentoring. So you can help scaffold newcomers into the social and technical norms of the project. Nothing much to look at it here, but that most people in this survey agreed that implicit mentoring does happen. It's a good way and all kinds of good stuff. So let's not focus on that. There's a QR code for you if you want to look into it more. But I wanted to this is another study then from done at Google, because what we wanted to do is, what are the patterns and anti-patterns of teaching through code reviews? And we got like 6 categories where you can have the patterns and anti-patterns of implicit mentoring. Like, why should something be fixed? What is the rationale? How to give examples? Be pragmatic. Not everything can be changed, right? So what can be changed given the timeline? tone. Toxicity is quite a problem in many open source projects. How do you give someone feedback that actually gets them in a learning frame of mind and not like, oh my God, this is gatekeeping, right? So that's again mentoring versus gatekeeping. And then the basic quality, right? Sometimes the quality could be that you're giving very thorough comments, a lot of comments, you're doing a good job, you're spending so much time. But some people might get overwhelmed and see like, oh my God, they're just dumping on me. And so you have to kind of figure out what's the right relationship or what's the right amount of changes or feedback you can give. All right. I'm going to jump through the next few slides and not talk about these because they were going more into detail. So I'm just going to skip. But a lot of my work, right, is in these papers, in this academic stuff, peer reviewed, very rigorous, very great, but really hard to consume for practitioners. So what we are doing is we are coming up, Georg Link, who's in Bitergia, but also CHAOSS community. I think he's a director or something there. So we are coming up with this book, mostly for practitioners, taking all these research insights we have into very much consumable, actionable insights so practitioners to use. So we have only 2 chapters left. We're almost there. So you can read more about it. But just a little flavor of, I should have put the transformer picture here. This is the era of transformers, right? Everything has changed. So with this new wave of AI that's helping with code, documentation, other things, what does open source sustainability mean in this new wave of AI? What I'm worried about is what is the AI-induced socio-technical debt, right? Because now a lot more contributions I have heard is coming through because it's easy to generate code. Many of the easy to detect quality signals are no longer there. The code looks great. It's good style, but it's most fluff, not real code, right? So it's very hard to just easily look at the quality signals. As such, maintainers are overworked and kind of feeling burnt out. And now there's like even more work to do. And AI is very well known to be not able to take into project context, not taken into the bigger picture. So it might be good now, but it might have maintainability issues later on, right? So my question is, what kind of socio-technical debt, socio meaning like maintainer burnout, you don't know who the contributors are, technical debt is these other things that can be induced because of AI generated code. And what can we come up with? What should the guardrails be that actually AI code contributions like this Copilot and other tools that are should take so that it can create AI code that is actually maintainable and all the good stuff. I have also been using AI and automated inclusivity checker, how to recognize and acknowledge glue work, how to create micro documentation so that it's not overwhelming, taking something huge, making it to smaller pieces, towards the context, giving multimedia, like also video formats, as well as to see how to identify and fix DevOps inefficiency through the CI/CD pipeline. So I've been doing this. Where can OSPO help? Most of my work, or like all of my work, is basically grounded from empirical work with practitioners, right? So we have to do a lot of interviews, surveys. That's when I reached out to Lance, like, I need some help with survey. And then he said, hey, you should come to this OSPO thing. I'm like, oh, I'll be loving to come. So we always need data, right? So would love to come to you to help us reach practitioners. Understanding where the actual challenges are, right? Help us prioritize where research should focus on. And once we have this cool stuff, the cool tools and the cool insights, how can we give it to you so you can take it and deploy it and make the difference, make the impact, right? Because my work lives in a archive paper somewhere, but it doesn't always get out into the field. And then the holy grail, we always need funding and grant support, right? Because we need to fund our students because they are the ones who do all the work really. So how can we get funding? Thank you to my group. They're awesome people. They are all the people who did the real work. I just tell them what to go and look at. And that's it. So that's my last slide. I'll leave this slide open so you can ask any questions.